we've got a few things to share jointly, but primarily our topic is for Alaskans to be ready today. You know, it's last spring, it was about a week before the Japanese tsunami, I made disaster preparedness for Alaskans a high priority in our state. The tsunami occurred, and then we were called upon as a state to find housing for 14 or 15,000 people that they thought would have to transit back from Japan, from American citizens who have to transit back here. I put that together, but realized that we can do some better work when it comes to housing, you know, shelter in times of emergency. And then, of course, you all remember I also had the opportunity to tour Joplin, Missouri after the tornado there. And I saw firsthand the damage that that tornado brought and the devastation it brought upon people. But I also saw a lot of great nonprofit groups acting, and local, state, federal government acting together to meet the needs of citizens. But it just drove home for me that you can never be too prepared for any kind of disaster. And then, of course, yesterday in Washington, D.C., the earthquake itself, with our D.C. office there, we learned once again that it's not really a matter of if something's going to happen, it's a matter of when for each one of us. And we do a pretty good job, I'll just tell you, as a state and at our staff levels. Our Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Services under the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs plan, drill, work on this. The municipality as well has their key people and staff level people moving in this area to be ready for disasters. And yet I think we have a challenge before us that I want to just raise for Alaskans. And the challenge is that us as Alaskans, individual Alaskans, we are not prepared. If you think about, particularly in this city, I'm coming to you from Anchorage, most of us who were raised here or work here, you go to the store 3 or 4 times a week just to pick up something extra for dinner. Well, in the time of a disaster or an emergency, that ability is not going to be there. If something happened to the port and we couldn't get goods in, or if in the case of a major disaster in this town in particular, we could not access stores. So gone are the days when the mayor and I were kids when we all had pantries. You know, we think the neighborhood store is going to supply it for us, and that's not the case. So our message today is Alaskans, get ready. Get a kit, get a plan. Let's get it together so that as Alaskans, we're ready for 7 days of food, and that we're able to prepare ourselves for 7 days on our own food, on our own purified water, in our own households. That's just a key element there. A couple of things I want to talk about beyond that before I turn the mic over to the mayor is I want to let Alaskans know a little bit about what the state's doing. The mayor is going to speak a little bit to the municipality side of things. But our administration has been proactive in disaster preparedness, not only at the planning level, but in making improvements to where we are. So for example, during the legislative session, we sought and secured $5 million for electrical generators and water purification systems. My mission that I handed over to John Madden here was, tell me what's needed to create additional power for 100,000 people in the case of a disaster. That doesn't mean 100,000 people you can turn the lights on like that, but it means that we will have the capacity over time to supply emergency power for large numbers. The legislature coordinated with me on that, gave us $5 million to make that purchase happen. Going forward, our cabinet is meeting this week, and we're getting a full-on briefing from our Division of Homeland Security, emergency management personnel on disaster preparedness from the leadership level. And that's frankly one of the reasons I called the mayor about a week and a half ago and said, could we talk at a leadership level about how we would respond and how we'd work together and coordinate together to get Alaskans ready. Finally, we're going to work with local leaders like Mayor Sullivan and community leaders beyond to create a plan to purchase and secure large volumes of food, kind of Alaskan food caches that are secure and that are there in our time of need. One of the things and I'm not a disaster preparedness expert by any stretch of the imagination. John Madden is here, our Director of Emergency Services, but one thing that I observed was that everybody in a disaster is impacted a little differently. If you're in the zone of the disaster, your house could be gone. So in Joplin, I was looking at, you couldn't even tell where the property lines were because of the devastation from the tornado. You know, you might see a fireplace standing, and you would see family members trying to find their goods. Then a little bit farther out, you'd see homes that were hit, but they were still somewhat habitable or still standing anyway. And then farther out, you know, of course, high wind damage, but less damage. So everybody is struck a little bit differently. But there, in a large-scale disaster, there are people who, you know, their disaster kit's not going to, they can't find it, it's gone, they need help. And that's one thing that we want state and local government prepared for, and we're working to better prepare us in that event. So I just want to underscore the personal responsibility of every Alaskan to get a kit, get prepared, get informed, and really spike that. This September is National Preparedness Month nationally, and we're going to take that to the next level here in the state of Alaska as well. So, Mayor, I'd like you to step up. I know you've been instrumental in the municipality of Anchorage in disaster preparedness during your term, so if you'd speak to that as well.
Oh, thank you, Governor. Well, I think the governor is right on target. I think, as many of you know, we've been working on the energy side of things to be prepared in case there was a disruption in the supply of natural gas, which, of course, not only heats our homes, but fuels the generators that provide our electricity. And for 2 years, we've run our Energy Watch program in October, where we've asked our residents to think about turning down the thermostat, maybe not using so many lights, not cooking or using the washer and dryer that particular period, just to see what could happen if residents really did participate in conservation measures and help save the day when it comes to energy usage. But the governor's message goes beyond that and talks about really if there was a disaster, and as somebody who was an 11-year-old in 1964 when the Good Friday earthquake hit, I vividly remember cooking in our stove, heating, boiling water, not in our stove, I mean in our fireplace. You had to make a fire, you had to boil the water to cook your food and to provide clean drinking water because services were disrupted for days. And quite frankly, I think we get a little bit complacent as time goes by and forget that that situation could happen again. So I think the governor's message is right on. We do have a responsibility, each and every one of us, to be prepared, particularly when we are so far geographically away from the lifelines that supply us. We have barges come in every several days, and if there is a disaster, as you mentioned, the stores only really keep a few days worth of inventory, so it's incumbent on us to be ready. At the city level, we do an awful lot of preparedness. Our Office of Emergency Operations, headed by Kevin Spillers, and our city manager, George Vacalis, participate in constant drills, tabletop exercises with the military, with the school district, with our large consumer customers, and we like to think that we're pretty well prepared. We know where the shelters are. A lot of the schools have backup generators, but it's not enough, and so we really do need to take that personal responsibility. I'll be the first to admit that my home is not prepared. I do not have an adequate supply of food or water, and so it's a great reminder. I think this weekend I'm going to do a little shopping and see if I can't get a little bit better prepared and lead by example. So with that, Governor, great program. Be glad to participate.
Thank you. Let me call John up. John Madden, our State Director of Homeland Security Emergency Services. If you could fill out a little bit about what the state does in terms of emergency planning, appreciate that. Thanks.
The hard work of a disaster is often done before the disaster strikes. It's difficult when the sun is shining to take that time and plan and set aside and inform. I have every member of my family, we've talked it through, and each one has a job. There's a job to help my wife's father. There's a job to look inside of our neighborhood, and my wife knows all the single parents, those with people with special needs, and to socialize it. We understand while government can help, government cannot solve. That's an individual responsibility. And as a state, we look at not just where the rubble might be from a disaster, but the effects of that. If the port is damaged, if the airport is damaged, then we no longer can be that transmodal to get food and water and other things out to the communities, and the impact on the health system. So we look at all the complexities and find the right set of people who can think their way through it and get most of the things solved before the event hits. And that's what the priority we have. Even going back so far as what happens in Seattle that would affect here. So every single Alaskan needs to be able to take care of themselves, to stabilize themselves and their own family, so that we can get that larger job of returning and restoring Alaska to a new economic and social and cultural equilibrium.